Tonight, we drift out onto open water, not into crashing waves or dramatic storms, but into something quieter, something slower. Imagine a wide gray sea stretching endlessly beneath a pale northern sky. The wind is steady, not violent. The ship beneath your feet creaks softly as timber shifts against timber. Ropes hum faintly in the breeze. Somewhere above, canvas sails billow and relax in a patient rhythm. You are not a captain. You are not a wealthy investor in a canal house. You are an ordinary crewman aboard a 17th century Dutch merchant vessel, one of the many ships operated by the powerful Dutch East India Company. Your journey will last months. The horizon will rarely change. The food will rarely improve. And the sea will feel endless. In this episode, we will move gently through 8 layers of life in the Dutch Golden Age, from cramped ship decks to the polished floors of Amsterdam mansions. We will consider trade, faith, governance, ambition, and the quiet machinery of early capitalism. But first, let us remain here, on deck, with salt in the air, and the slow rhythm of the ocean beneath you. Take a slow breath. The voyage begins. Let us remain here a little longer. Do not rush to the ports of Asia or the polished canals of Amsterdam just yet. Stay on the deck. Feel the boards beneath your feet, thick oak planks, worn smooth in some places, splintered in others. They are scrubbed daily with sand and seawater, not for comfort, but to prevent rot and sickness. Cleanliness at sea is not elegance. It is a necessity. You are one of perhaps 200 men aboard an East Indiaman, large, slow, heavily armed merchant vessels operated by the Dutch East India Company. The ship is both a cargo hauler and floating fortress. Cannons line its sides, not because battle is constant, but because danger is always possible. Pirates, rival European powers, unpredictable coastal politics. Yet most days are not dramatic. Most days are repetition. You wake in darkness. The air below deck is stale from breathing bodies and damp wood. You learn to move carefully in the cramped space, stepping over boots, avoiding elbows. Hammocks sway gently even when anchored in harbor, and more so at sea. There is no silence aboard the ship. Ever. Wood creaks. Ropes strain. Water slaps against the hull. Men cough. Somewhere above, footsteps cross the deck. The ocean is a constant companion, never loud enough to overwhelm you in calm weather, but never absent either. Breakfast is practical. Hard biscuit, sometimes softened in weak beer or watered wine. Salted herring if available. Perhaps dried peas boiled into a thin porridge. The flavors are blunt and repetitive. You do not eat for pleasure. You eat to endure. Water grows foul after weeks in barrels. A faint wooden tang, sometimes algae. It is still precious. Every ration is measured. The ship is governed by time, but not by clocks as you know them. Sandglasses mark the watches. Bells are struck at intervals. For hours on duty. For hours off. Over and over, day and night blending together. During your watch, you climb rigging barefoot for better grip. The ropes are coarse. Tar sticks to your palms. The wind pulls at your shirt. From high above the deck, the sea looks endless and strangely peaceful. A blue-gray plain without boundary. Then you descend again into labor, coiling rope, securing cargo, pumping bilge water from the lower hull. The bilge is not pleasant. It collects seawater, waste, rot. You do not dwell on its smell. You focus on the rhythm of the pump. Up, down, up, down. Repetition becomes comfort. Storms interrupt that rhythm. They arrive sometimes without warning, a darkening of sky, a shift in wind. Sails must be reefed quickly. Orders are shouted. The deck tilts steeply. You brace yourself against the mast, legs wide, fingers gripping ropes slick with rain. At night during a storm, the world reduces to sensation. Cold water on your face. Wind pressing against your ribs. The groan of the hull under strain. You cannot see far. Only the nearest lantern swinging wildly. When morning comes, the sea often looks deceptively calm, as if nothing happened. A few torn sails. A cracked spar. Repairs begin immediately. The voyage cannot pause. Illness moves quietly through the crew. Scurvy creeps in gradually when fresh produce runs out. Gums swell. Energy fades. Some men grow pale and withdrawn. The ship's surgeon carries dried herbs, vinegar, and limited knowledge. Remedies are inconsistent. Hope rests on reaching land quickly. Fever may spread in warm climates. The air below deck grows thick and humid as the ship rounds the Cape of Good Hope. The sun becomes intense. Skin burns easily. Clothes cling damply to your back. And yet, in calmer moments, there is beauty. Flying fish dart from the water like silver arrows. At night, the sea sometimes glows faintly with phosphorescence, tiny organisms illuminating each disturbance. When the hull cuts through water, it leaves a glowing wake behind it, like a path of stars. You lean against the railing and look up. The sky at sea is enormous. Without city lights, the stars appear sharper, brighter. Constellations shift gradually as you move south. The pole star sinks lower on the horizon. New patterns emerge. Navigation depends on these stars. The ship's officers consult charts and instruments, cross staffs, astrolabes, measuring angles between horizon and celestial bodies. Precision matters. A small miscalculation can mean weeks of delay. You, however, focus on simpler concerns. Will the wind remain steady? Will rations hold? Will you survive to collect your pay? Months pass slowly. The calendar becomes abstract. You measure time by meals, watches, repairs. You celebrate small milestones quietly, crossing the equator, sighting land after weeks of nothing but sea. When land does appear, it feels unreal at first. A smudge on the horizon, then trees, then the coastline. You anchor near a fortified trading post, perhaps Batavia, in present-day Indonesia. Heat wraps around you like a heavy blanket. The smells are new, spices, tropical vegetation, unfamiliar cooking fires. But your stay is brief and tightly controlled. Cargo is loaded, pepper sacks, nutmeg barrels, silk, porcelain. Valuable goods are counted carefully. The hold fills with wealth destined for European markets. You handle it. You stack it. You secure it. It is not yours. Your wage depends on a safe return. And so, after repairs and resupply, you turn back toward home. The return journey is no shorter. The sea remains vast. The horizon remains unchanging. Monotony deepens. Conversations grow quieter. Some men stare at the water for long stretches, lost in thought. Others carve small tokens from wood, miniature ships, simple spoons. When a burial at sea occurs, it is solemn and brief. A body sewn into canvas, a short prayer, a tilt of the plank. The splash is swallowed instantly by the waves. There is no spectacle, only continuation. Eventually, after storms, calms, illness, and endless labor, you approach the shallow coastline of the Dutch Republic. The land is flat. Windmills turn slowly. The air smells faintly of peat smoke and damp earth. You step onto the dock, legs unsteady not from weakness, but from memory of motion. For days afterward, even in a stable bed, your body feels as though it sways. Life aboard a 17th century Dutch merchant ship was not constant battle, nor romantic adventure. It was repetition, discipline, salted meat and hard bread, the slow turning of sandglasses, the endless conversation between wood and water. And from this quiet, persistent rhythm of maritime labor emerged fortunes. Fortunes that reshaped global trade, altered distant societies, and elevated certain men to extraordinary power. In the next segment, we will step ashore and examine one such man, patient, calculating, and central to the expansion of Dutch influence overseas. Now that we have stepped off the swaying deck and onto steadier ground, let us remain for a moment in the humid air of Southeast Asia. While you were hauling ropes and chewing salted meat, decisions were being made in distant offices and fortified settlements. Decisions that shaped the routes you sailed and the cargo you carried. At the center of many of those decisions stood a man named Jan Pieterszoon Cohen. He was not born into nobility. He did not inherit a throne. He began life in 1587 in the Dutch town of Hoorn, the son of a merchant family. His upbringing was practical and disciplined. He was educated in trade and accounting, not in courtly manners. You might imagine him as a young man walking narrow brick streets, listening to conversations about cargoes, exchange rates, and distant markets. The Dutch Republic was young then, independent from Spanish rule, ambitious, commercially driven. Opportunity lay not in land, but in trade. Cohen traveled to Rome as a youth to learn bookkeeping from Flemish merchants. There, amid churches and classical ruins, he absorbed lessons not only in arithmetic, but in organization and efficiency. He learned that power often rests not in swords, but in ledgers. When he entered service with the Dutch East India Company, he joined an enterprise unlike anything the world had seen before, a joint stock company with quasi-governmental powers. It could wage war, negotiate treaties, establish colonies, mint coins. It was commerce fused with sovereignty. Cohen rose steadily through its ranks. His letters reveal a methodical mind. He wrote of discipline, of order, of the necessity of firm control over trade routes. He believed that monopoly was essential. Competition, in his view, weakened profit and therefore weakened the Republic itself. In 1619, he became Governor-General of the Dutch East Indies. Imagine him in Batavia, the fortified settlement that would become the administrative heart of Dutch operations in Asia. The climate was heavy and damp. The streets are muddy during rain. Yet Cohen envisioned something orderly, a European-style city transplanted into tropical soil. He enforced strict policies. Trade agreements were negotiated with local rulers, sometimes peacefully, sometimes through forceful pressure. Fortifications were expanded. Bureaucratic systems tightened. Ships were directed with precision. Cohen was patient. He believed that lasting influence required structure, stable harbors, regulated markets, controlled production of spices like nutmeg and cloves. These spices were not mere flavorings. In Europe, they commanded extraordinary prices. Control over supply meant immense wealth. But such control required suppression of rivals. Portuguese traders had long been present in Asian waters. English merchants were expanding their own operations. Local powers had their own interests. The seas you sailed were not empty. They were crowded with ambition. Cohen's governance combined administrative skill with uncompromising resolve. When resistance emerged, he responded decisively. The consequences of his policies were profound and, at times, deeply destructive for local populations. Entire communities were displaced or forcibly reorganized under company rule. Yet in the calm cadence of history, what stands out is not a single dramatic moment, but the steady expansion of a system. Under Cohen, Batavia grew into a hub of commerce. Warehouses filled with pepper and textiles. Clerks recorded shipments meticulously. Cannons guarded the harbor. From Amsterdam to Asia, a web of trade tightened. And all of it depended on the same slow voyages you experienced. Months at sea, fragile hulls, disciplined crews. Cohen himself did not live to see the full maturation of the empire he helped construct. He died in 1629, still in office, during a siege by Javanese forces. His life ended far from his birthplace, amid tropical heat and the constant tension of frontier governance. His legacy remains complex. To some in his homeland, he symbolized determination and commercial brilliance. To others, particularly in Indonesia, his policies represent coercion and harsh colonial foundations. But in the quiet analysis of history, we observe patterns rather than judgment. Cohen exemplifies a new type of power emerging in the 17th century, the corporate governor. A man whose authority flowed not from crown or cathedral, but from shareholders and contracts. The world you glimpsed from the deck, the endless sea, was not random exploration. It was a carefully organized expansion. Ledgers in Amsterdam, fortresses in Batavia, sailors hauling ropes between them. As we transition now, let us narrow our focus from the life of one administrator to a single decisive event. An event that shaped Dutch maritime dominance and altered the balance of European power at sea. In the next segment, we will gently unfold the story of a pivotal maritime conflict that strengthened the Dutch Republic's commercial reach and reinforced its confidence upon the world stage. Let us remain a little longer in the warm, suspended air of the Indonesian archipelago. The sea, which had felt so endless and empty during the Atlantic crossing and the rounding of the Cape, now feels crowded. Not with ships alone, but with purpose. Canoes move between islands. Coastal villages breathe with the rhythm of fishing, drying, bargaining. The scent of clove and nutmeg drifts inland and out to sea alike, carried on damp breezes that cling gently to skin and cloth. For the merchants of the Dutch Republic, these islands were not peripheral. They were central. The small brown seed of nutmeg, the curled bark of cinnamon, the dried buds of clove. These were commodities that could finance fleets, fund wars, and construct entire neighborhoods of brick canal houses thousands of miles away. To understand the expansion of the Verenigde Oost-Indisch Company, the VOC, you must imagine not a single dramatic conquest, but a slow tightening of threads. At first, the company presented itself as a trading partner. Agreements were negotiated with local rulers in Ambon, Ternate, Banda. Contracts were drafted. Seals were impressed. Oaths were sworn. The language of cooperation was polite and formal. But beneath the politeness lay arithmetic. If nutmeg could only be grown in one small cluster of islands, then controlling those islands meant controlling global supply. And controlling supply meant controlling price. The logic was quiet, methodical, relentless. In the Banda Islands, company representatives urged exclusivity. Sell only to us, they insisted. We will protect you from rivals. We will guarantee purchase. Yet for generations, Bandanese traders had operated in an open marketplace. They had bargained with Portuguese, English, Javanese, and others. Competition raised prices. Exclusivity lowered them. Resistance followed. The company responded with force sufficient to ensure compliance. The details of these confrontations are sobering, and history records that entire communities were displaced or destroyed in the struggle for monopoly. It is enough, in this calm reflection, to understand that commercial ambition reshaped lives permanently. After control was established, the landscape itself was reorganized. Nutmeg orchards were cataloged. Production quotas were enforced. European overseers monitored output. Enslaved laborers, brought from other islands and regions, worked groves that had once belonged to local families. Walk slowly through one of these regulated orchards. The soil is dark, almost black. Fallen leaves form a soft carpet. The nutmeg fruit splits open to reveal a bright red aril, the mace, cradling the seed. It is beautiful, almost delicate in appearance. Hardly the object one would expect to inspire fleets and violence. Yet beauty and brutality often coexist quietly in economic systems. From these islands, ships departed in steady intervals. They did not hurry. They followed seasonal winds, the monsoon patterns that had guided sailors in the Indian Ocean for centuries. Knowledge of these winds, when to depart, when to wait, was as valuable as any weapon. Batavia became the administrative heart of this growing network. Founded in 1619 on the ruins of the Javanese city of Jayakarta, Batavia was designed with European order in mind. Straight canals cut through tropical terrain. Warehouses stood in rows along the waterfront. Offices recorded cargo in meticulous detail. Imagine walking its streets. The air is heavy. Mosquitoes hum near stagnant water. Dutch-style gabled houses line canals that reflect the pale sky. Yet the sounds are not European alone. You hear Malay spoken in markets. Hokkien Chinese merchants negotiate in quiet tones. Javanese laborers move crates under watchful supervision. It is a city layered with cultures, yet structured around company authority. The mortality rate among Europeans stationed there was high. Tropical disease moved quietly through households unaccustomed to the climate. New arrivals sometimes survived only a few seasons. Letters home described fevers, humidity, and a sense of isolation from familiar landscapes. Yet replacements kept arriving. For in Amsterdam, profits were visible. Dividends were distributed to shareholders. Investors read printed reports detailing shipments and returns. The system functioned with mechanical calm. Ships formed a rotating cycle. From the Indonesian archipelago, cloves, nutmeg, mace. From India, textiles, indigo. From Japan, silver and copper. From Africa, provisions, enslaved laborers. From Europe, weapons, manufactured goods, officials. Each voyage was a link in a chain that encircled the globe. It is tempting to imagine expansion as dramatic, battles, proclamations, banners raised. But much of it unfolded in ledgers and warehouses. A clerk dips his quill into ink. He records quantities. He tallies debts. He calculates percentages. Outside, laborers load barrels onto carts. Somewhere, a governor drafts instructions for enforcing quotas in a distant island village. The empire, in this case, is bureaucratic, steady, paper-bound. The VOC became one of the most powerful corporate entities in early modern history. It possessed the authority to wage war, sign treaties, coin money, and govern territory, all in the name of trade. Yet at its core remained something simple. A ship at anchor, a crate of spices in its hold, a sailor leaning against the rail in humid dusk. Imagine yourself once more aboard that ship, anchored off Batavia. The sky glows orange as the sun sinks. The water ripples softly. From shore, you hear faint sounds, hammering from shipyards, distant voices from markets, perhaps the low call to prayer from a nearby mosque. You are far from home. And yet this place, too, is now tied to Amsterdam by invisible threads of credit, authority, and expectation. The expansion continues not in leaps, but in increments. Fortifications in Ambon, agreements in Macassar, patrols in the Banda Sea. Rival European powers, English, Portuguese, probe for weakness. Local rulers navigate alliances carefully. Every contract signed alters the balance slightly. Every shipment dispatched tightens the company's grip. And over decades, the archipelago becomes integrated into a global economy that stretches from the humid tropics to the cool brick streets of the Dutch Republic. Yet the sea which connects these worlds is not always cooperative. For all the careful planning, the rotating schedules, the monsoon calculations, storms still rise. Hulls still crack. Ships still vanish. Not every ledger entry has a tidy conclusion. In the next segment, we will descend beneath the surface of the water itself, where the remains of these voyages rest quietly on the ocean floor, preserved in sand and silence, waiting to tell their stories through archaeology rather than account books. Let us leave the humid docks of Batavia and the orderly canal houses of Amsterdam behind for a moment. Instead, imagine water, cold in the north, warm and heavy in the tropics, always moving, always patient. Beneath its surface lie the remains of ships that once carried ambition across oceans. The sea is not sentimental. It does not preserve monuments out of respect. It breaks, scatters, buries, and sometimes, by accident, protects. For every successful return voyage of the Dutch merchant fleets, there were vessels that never completed the circle. Storms gathered with little warning. Sandbanks shifted invisibly beneath shallow water. Hulls, weakened by months of salt and strain, gave way under pressure. And sometimes navigation itself, dependent on imperfect charts and celestial calculations, faltered by only a few degrees, enough to mean disaster. Imagine standing on deck at night. The wind has changed. The waves feel different, steeper, less predictable. The sky is obscured. You cannot see stars to guide you. The timbers groan beneath your feet, not violently but insistently. Then a jolt. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a grinding resistance as would meets reef or shoal. The sound carries through the hull like a low, splintering sigh. Water begins to seep in. Not a sudden flood, at first, but a steady intrusion. Sailors move quickly, though not chaotically. Buckets are lifted. Pumps are worked. Commands are shouted, then swallowed by wind. If the hull fails completely, the sea takes what it wants. Cargo shifts. Barrels break free. The hold fills. And then silence. Over time, the wreck settles. In colder northern waters, like those of the North Sea or the Baltic, the process can be strangely gentle. Low oxygen levels slow decay. Mud envelopes the timbers, sealing them from currents and organisms that might otherwise consume them. Centuries pass. Above, nations rise and fall. Markets fluctuate. Wars are fought and forgotten. But below, in darkness, a ship rests much as it falls. When archaeologists discover such a wreck, they do not find only wood and iron. They find patterns. A row of cannons still lashed in place. Crates stacked in disciplined order. Personal belongings, a comb, a shoe, a pewter spoon, caught between beams. Each object is quiet, but together they form a portrait. One such example is the Batavia, wrecked in 1629 off the coast of Western Australia. The ship had sailed under the authority of the VOC, heavy with silver and trade goods. When it struck a reef, chaos followed, not only from the sea, but among survivors stranded on barren islands. We do not need to dwell on the darker details of that episode. It is enough to know that isolation, scarcity, and power struggles left their mark before rescue arrived. What matters for our purposes is what remains. Fragments of hull, coral-encrusted cannons, coins fused together by salt. Archaeologists carefully raise these items from the seabed, preserving them in freshwater baths to draw out centuries of salt crystals that would otherwise shatter the wood as it dries. The process is meticulous, slow, almost meditative. Each plank is catalogued, each artifact photographed, measurements recorded. In this way, the wreck becomes less a tragedy and more a time capsule. Closer to home, in the shallow waters of the former Zuiderzee, now partly reclaimed land, Dutch archaeologists have uncovered numerous merchant vessels preserved in silt. Entire hulls lie intact beneath fields and polders that were once seabed. Farmers plowing reclaimed land occasionally strike wood instead of stone. Beneath the soil lies a 17th century cargo ship, its structure surprisingly complete. Imagine that, walking across a quiet meadow in modern Netherlands, unaware that beneath your boots rests a ship that once sailed toward Java, carrying textiles and expectations. Shipwreck archaeology reveals details that written records omit. Ledgers may tell us what cargo was supposed to be aboard, but a wreck tells us what was actually there. Sometimes the difference is small: an extra crate of ceramics, a few personal items not officially listed. Sometimes it is significant: contraband goods, private trade conducted quietly by sailors hoping to supplement meager wages. You might picture a sailor tucking away a small bundle of spices in his sea chest, hoping to sell them upon return. If the ship sinks, that hidden bundle becomes evidence centuries later. The sea preserves secrets without judgment. In warmer waters, preservation is less forgiving. Shipworms bore through hulls. Currents scatter debris. What remains may be only an anchor, a few cannon, shards of porcelain. Yet even scattered fragments can tell a story. Chemical analysis of wood reveals where trees were felled. Ceramic styles trace trade connections between Asia and Europe. Isotopic studies of ballast stones indicate the regions ships frequented. Each discovery confirms the global reach of the 17th century maritime network. And yet, the ocean remains vast. Thousands of ships have never been found. Their final resting places are known only to currents and sediment. When you imagine a Dutch merchant ship setting sail from Texel, bound for Indonesia, remember that its fate was never guaranteed. Investors calculated risk carefully. Insurance markets developed precisely because loss was expected. The ocean was not merely a highway. It was a testing ground. For the sailors aboard, shipwreck meant more than economic setback. It meant cold water, uncertainty, perhaps a long wait on an unfamiliar shore. For shareholders in Amsterdam, it meant numbers on a page adjusting downward. Two experiences of the same event, separated by class and geography. As we surface from these underwater reflections, notice how the wrecks form a quiet counterpoint to the grand narrative of expansion. Empires seem solid in retrospect, but they were built on wooden hulls, vulnerable to reefs and storms. The spice trade feels inevitable in hindsight, yet each voyage depended on weather, skill, and fragile planks of oak. In the next segment, we will leave the ocean and return to land, not to the docks or the shipyards, but to the inner world of belief and morality. For the Dutch merchants who funded and governed this maritime empire were shaped deeply by religious conviction. Their sense of duty, thrift, and discipline was influenced by a particular strain of Protestant thought that colored not only sermons but balance sheets. As we leave the slow, shifting seabed behind, let us return to land, to narrow streets paved with brick, to tall houses leaning slightly over calm canals, to the steady tolling of church bells across the Dutch Republic. The 17th century in the Netherlands was not only an age of ships and silver, it was also an age of belief. The dominant religious influence in the Dutch Republic was Calvinism, a Protestant tradition shaped by the teachings of John Calvin. Its presence was not always loud or theatrical. It did not rely on grand cathedrals filled with gilded statues. Instead, it favored restraint, simplicity, order. If you step into a Calvinist church of the time, you would notice the difference immediately. Whitewashed walls, clear glass windows, wooden pews arranged in quiet rows, a pulpit placed prominently at the center. There is no incense drifting through the air, no elaborate frescoes covering the ceiling. The focus is on the spoken word, on scripture read carefully, methodically, on sermons that encourage discipline, humility, and self-examination. For merchants and ship captains, this religious framework quietly shaped daily life. Calvinism emphasized ideas such as predestination, the belief that God had already determined who would be saved. This doctrine, though abstract, had subtle psychological effects. One could not earn salvation through grand gestures or wealth. Yet prosperity was sometimes interpreted as a sign of divine favor. This created a delicate balance. Wealth was not to be flaunted carelessly, but neither was it to be rejected outright. Hard work, thrift, reliability, these were seen as virtuous. Wastefulness, extravagance without purpose, suspect. Imagine yourself as a merchant in Amsterdam. You rise early. The canal outside your window reflects pale morning light. You dress in dark wool, modest in cut. No unnecessary ornament. You walk to your counting house, ledger tucked under your arm. Before business begins, you may pause for prayer. Not dramatic prayer, not loud, a quiet acknowledgement of duty. Your investments in distant ships are not merely financial risks. They are responsibilities. Employees depend on them. Families depend on them. The city's prosperity depends on them. In this worldview, commerce becomes almost moral in character. To keep accurate accounts is not simply good business, it is ethical behavior. To honor contracts is a matter of integrity. To reinvest profits wisely reflects prudence. This ethic supported the development of joint stock companies like the Dutch East India Company. Shareholders expected returns, certainly, but they also expected order, predictability, transparency in ledgers. Calvinist values aligned neatly with such structures. Steady growth over reckless expansion, planning over impulse, documentation over rumor. And yet, there were tensions. The wealth flowing into the Dutch Republic was immense. Spices, silk, porcelain, silver, luxuries from across the globe. Merchant homes grew taller, interiors more refined. Art collections flourished. Painters like Rembrandt and Vermeer captured scenes of domestic calm and quiet prosperity. How did one reconcile modest religious ideals with increasing comfort? Often through moderation. Even wealthy households maintained a certain aesthetic restraint. The furniture was elegant, but not overly ornate. Walls might display art, but rooms were not overwhelmed by decoration. Black clothing remained fashionable among elites, signaling sobriety and discipline. Prosperity was acceptable, as long as it appeared controlled. Sunday mornings transformed the rhythm of the city. Markets closed. Ships rested at anchor. Families walked quietly to church. The canals, usually busy with movement, seemed subdued. The sermons reminded congregants of humility, of the fleeting nature of life, of the importance of charity and social responsibility. It is important to note that not every resident of the Dutch Republic was Calvinist. The nation was unusually tolerant for its time. Catholics, Jews, and other Protestant sects lived within its borders, sometimes worshiping discreetly in hidden churches tucked inside ordinary houses. This religious diversity added complexity to urban life. Still, Calvinist ethics held significant cultural influence, particularly among the ruling merchant class. You might imagine a ship captain returning from Indonesia. He brings with him stories of tropical heat, unfamiliar customs, and distant markets. He also brings wealth, perhaps a share of the profits. Upon his return, he does not build a palace of marble. Instead, he purchases a solid canal house, furnishes it carefully, donates a portion to charity, invests in another voyage. The cycle continues. This steady rhythm, earn, reinvest, maintain order, contributed to the Dutch Golden Age's stability. Yet beneath this calm surface lay contradictions. The same disciplined system that emphasized ethical conduct at home oversaw harsh colonial practices abroad. The language of duty and divine order sometimes coexisted with coercion and exploitation in distant territories. From Amsterdam's perspective, the system appeared orderly and profitable. From Indonesia's perspective, the experience could be far less balanced. History often holds such contrasts quietly, without dramatic flourish. What matters for our restful journey tonight is the atmosphere of the Dutch Republic itself, a society that prized neatness, punctuality, and careful stewardship. Imagine candlelight flickering over a ledger's pages, columns of numbers written in precise handwriting. Margins are clean, ink dried carefully before the book is closed. Outside, canal water laps gently against stone walls. Inside, the merchant feels a sense of completion, not excitement, not triumph, just order restored for the day. This ethic extended beyond commerce into governance. In the next segment, we will explore how the Dutch Republic structured its political system, how provinces negotiated authority, how regents balanced power, and how a relatively small nation maintained remarkable stability during a century of global expansion. The canal water remains still. A faint ripple passes beneath a narrow bridge. Somewhere, a shutter closes softly against the evening air. We now turn from private conscience to public structure, from the merchant's ledger to the architecture of governance that allowed those ledgers to matter. The Dutch Republic of the 17th century was not a kingdom. It had no crowned monarch seated permanently on a gilded throne. Instead, it was a confederation of provinces: Holland, Zeeland, Utrecht, Gelderland, Overijssel, Friesland, and Groningen, each with its own local authority, each protective of its autonomy. Power flowed sideways more than downward. At the heart of this system stood the States General, an assembly of representatives from the provinces. They met in The Hague, a city of administrative calm rather than theatrical grandeur. Decisions were debated, negotiated, adjusted. Consensus mattered. It was not always swift, but it was deliberate. This decentralized structure suited a mercantile society. Cities like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and Leiden wielded significant influence. Urban regents, wealthy merchants, and civic leaders guided policy. They were not nobles in the traditional feudal sense, though some adopted aristocratic habits. Their authority rested less on inherited titles and more on property, trade, and networks of trust. In this environment, commerce and governance intertwined almost seamlessly. The Dutch East India Company, formally established in 1602, was more than a trading enterprise. It was granted powers that feel almost governmental: the authority to wage war, negotiate treaties, mint coins, and establish colonies in Asia. This blending of public and private authority was innovative. The company operated through chambers located in different cities. Investors purchased shares. Dividends were distributed when profits allowed. Decisions were recorded carefully, often with painstaking attention to detail. It was capitalism in an early, recognizable form. Shares could be bought and sold. Risk could be distributed. Capital could be pooled for ventures too large for any single merchant. Yet beneath the financial innovation lay a culture that valued stability over spectacle. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange, often cited as the world's first formal stock market, did not resemble the frantic trading floors of later centuries. Transactions were structured. Meetings occurred at predictable times. Information circulated through letters and printed pamphlets. Even speculation, when it occurred, tended to unfold in measured tones. The Republic's governance reinforced this measured quality. The office of stadtholder, often held by members of the House of Orange, served as a kind of executive authority, particularly in military matters. Yet this position was not absolute. Its power waxed and waned depending on political circumstances. There were periods known as the stadtholderless eras, when the Republic functioned without appointing one at all. This flexibility is striking. Rather than anchoring identity in a single ruler, the Dutch Republic placed trust in institutions, in councils, in procedures. Meetings began with formal greetings. Agendas were reviewed, minutes recorded, the quiet hum of administration day after day. One might imagine entering a council chamber in The Hague. Heavy wooden table, chairs arranged in symmetry, maps unfurled across polished surfaces, candles burn steadily, their wax pooling slowly at the base. Voices speak not in dramatic declarations, but in reasoned argument. Trade policy, naval funding, relations with England or France. Ships at sea depend upon these conversations. The fleet's maintenance, the protection of trade routes, the negotiation of tariffs, all require funding. And funding flows from commerce. Thus, governance and capitalism form a circle. Merchants finance the state protects merchants. Both rely on predictability. Taxes are assessed carefully. Provincial quotas are calculated. Naval expeditions are budgeted with caution. There is something deeply methodical in this arrangement. Even military conflict, inevitable in a competitive European landscape, was approached with logistical planning. The Dutch Navy, for example, became one of the most formidable in the world, not through flamboyant pageantry, but through careful shipbuilding, disciplined crews, and strategic foresight. And yet, as with all systems, there were fractures. Provincial disagreements could stall decision-making. Rivalries between urban elites could complicate alliances. Economic downturns occasionally tested confidence. But compared to many contemporary monarchies torn by absolutism or religious warfare, the Dutch Republic exhibited remarkable resilience. Its urban middle class, artisans, shopkeepers, minor officials, benefited from this stability. Literacy rates were high. Newspapers circulated. Political pamphlets debated ideas openly. Public discourse existed, though within boundaries. The calm exterior of canal houses concealed lively conversations about governance and trade. You might imagine an evening gathering in a merchant's home. A small group sits around a table after dinner. Wine poured in modest glasses. A printed pamphlet passed from hand to hand. The topic, naval expenditures, or tariffs imposed by England. Voices remain controlled. Disagreement does not escalate into shouting. It simmers gently, expressed through measured language. This culture of negotiation, sometimes slow, sometimes frustrating, prevented the sudden convulsions that characterized more centralized regimes. And all the while, ships continued to sail. From the Baltic came timber and grain. From West Africa, gold and tragic human cargo. From Indonesia, spices. From the Americas, sugar and tobacco. The Republic's wealth rested upon these networks, some orderly, some deeply troubling. But within Amsterdam's canals, the rhythm remained consistent. Brick facades reflected in water, merchants balancing accounts, officials drafting resolutions, church bells marking the hours, order layered upon order. In our next segment, we will step away from council chambers and stock exchanges. We will explore the social structure that underpinned this society, the hierarchy that defined who held power, who labored, and how class distinctions quietly shaped daily life. From regents to dock workers, from wealthy investors to sailors' widows, the Dutch Republic was not a uniform experience. Morning returns quietly to Amsterdam. Light filters through tall windows, sliding down whitewashed walls. Outside, a milk cart rattles over cobblestones. Somewhere, a church bell marks the hour, not urgently, just steadily, as it has done for generations. Beneath the outward calm of the Dutch Republic existed a carefully layered social structure. It was not a feudal pyramid in the medieval sense. nor was it an entirely fluid society of equal merchants. It was something in between, structured but permeable, stable yet subtly shifting. At the top stood the regent class. These were the urban elites, the wealthy merchant families who dominated city councils and provincial assemblies. They were not kings or dukes, yet their influence could rival that of European nobility. Their power was civic rather than feudal. It rested on property ownership, business success, education, and family networks. Many regent families intermarried, consolidating wealth and authority across generations. Their homes were tall canal houses with symmetrical facades and large windows, designed not only for light, but as quiet declarations of prosperity. Inside, furniture was well-crafted but restrained. Paintings adorned the walls, portraits, landscapes, scenes of domestic virtue. Above all, they valued order. Below them stood the broader merchant class, ship owners, traders, brewers, textile entrepreneurs. They were prosperous, though not always politically powerful. Some hoped their children might marry into regent families. Social mobility was possible, though gradual. Respectability mattered deeply. A tidy home, disciplined children, and regular church attendance signaled belonging. Then came skilled artisans, carpenters, printers, glassmakers, shipwrights. Their workshops filled narrow streets with the scent of wood shavings, ink, and tar. Apprentices rose early to sweep floors and prepare tools. Masters oversaw production with careful supervision. Guilds regulated standards and membership. They provided support in times of illness or hardship. In a society shaped by commerce, skill had value. Below artisans were laborers, dock workers, peat cutters, canal diggers, domestic servants. Their lives were physically demanding. A dock worker might rise before dawn, hands rough from rope and timber, shoulders stiff from loading barrels of grain or sugar. A maid in a canal house scrubbed floors, carried water, tended fires, often unseen by the household's guests. Yet even among laborers, there was dignity and routine. The Netherlands, unlike many European regions, experienced relatively high urban wages during its golden age. Poverty existed, certainly, but starvation was less widespread than in parts of rural Europe. Charity systems, often church-administered, provided basic relief. Orphanages, almshouses, and civic institutions formed a quiet safety net. Still, inequality remained unmistakable. A regent's son studied Latin and law. A dockworker's son carried sacks before he learned to write his name. Women occupied carefully defined spaces within this structure. Merchant wives often managed household finances with precision. They supervised servants, arranged marriages, and oversaw charitable donations. Some ran businesses when husbands traveled. Portraits from the period frequently depict women seated calmly, lace collars framing composed expressions. Their gaze is steady, self-contained. Working-class women labored as well, selling fish in markets, mending sails, washing laundry in cold canal water. The Dutch Republic valued domestic virtue, but it did not entirely confine women to silence. Literacy among women was higher than in many contemporary societies. Letters were written. Accounts were kept. Children moved through this hierarchy from an early age. A merchant's child might attend a Latin school, studying scripture and arithmetic. A laborer's child might begin work as a helper by the age of 10 or 12. Life expectancy was uncertain. Illness could alter fortunes quickly. A merchant's wealth might dissolve through failed ventures. A sailor might not return from sea. There was stability, but not permanence. Religious identity also shaped social belonging. The Dutch Republic was officially Calvinist, yet it tolerated other faiths more than many European states. Catholics, Jews, Lutherans, each found a place, though often quietly. Catholic churches operated discreetly in hidden chapels behind ordinary facades. Jewish communities established synagogues and participated in trade networks. Tolerance, here, was pragmatic as much as philosophical. Commerce thrived on inclusion. Still, not everyone fit comfortably within this order. The poor without guild connections. Sailors injured at sea. Immigrants without established networks. Urban authorities sought to manage poverty through regulation. Begging could be restricted, vagrancy discouraged, workhouses established. The system preferred discipline over disorder. You might imagine walking through an Amsterdam street at midday. Regent in dark cloak passing a baker's apprentice. Merchant negotiating delivery terms with a brewer. Servant carrying baskets of linen. Dockworker wiping sweat from his brow. Each occupies a role. Each understands, more or less, where they stand. And yet, the structure is not entirely rigid. Wealth generated through trade allows certain families to ascend. Investment in the VOC might transform a modest merchant into a significant figure within a generation. Opportunity exists, but always within the framework of order. The Dutch Republic prided itself on balance. Not a flamboyant monarchy, not chaotic democracy, but layered governance, civic participation, commercial energy. This balance extended even to public morality. Sumptuary laws occasionally attempted to limit excessive displays of luxury. Modesty remained an ideal, even among the wealthy. A canal house might be grand, but never ostentatious like a Versailles palace. Restraint was admired, and so the society functioned. Merchants calculating risk, artisans shaping wood and sailcloth, sailors embarking on long voyages, regents drafting policies in candlelit rooms. All part of a web, structured, interdependent, quietly resilient. Now, as the day settles and lamps are lit along the canals, we turn to our final thematic contrast. We began this journey at sea, amid salted meat, creaking hulls, and endless horizon. In our next segment, we step inside the elegant stillness of an Amsterdam canal mansion. There, order reaches its most refined expression. The canal at dusk is almost perfectly still. Water reflects the narrow facades like a softened mirror. Window panes glow amber behind small panes of glass. A servant moves quietly inside, adjusting a candle. The air carries the faint scent of peat smoke and distant river water. You approach one of the tall houses lining the Herengracht, one of the most prestigious canals in Amsterdam. Its exterior is elegant but restrained. A narrow frontage, rising 4 or 5 stories high. A gabled crown at the top, perhaps stepped, perhaps bell-shaped, announcing wealth without extravagance. This is not a palace. It is something quieter. Inside, you step into a long entrance hall paved with black and white marble tiles. The pattern is geometric, calm, orderly. Walls are paneled in dark wood polished to a soft sheen. Hooks hold cloaks. A carved staircase curves upward, its banister worn smooth by generations of hands. The air smells faintly of beeswax and dried herbs. This is the world of a prosperous merchant family, perhaps a director of the VOC, perhaps a successful trader in textiles or sugar. Their life is measured, disciplined, carefully arranged. The ground floor contains a formal reception room. Tall windows overlook the canal, designed deliberately large. In the Dutch Republic, expansive windows were a statement. We have nothing to hide. Prosperity displayed itself through transparency rather than fortification. Light fills the room even on gray days. Paintings hang on the walls, landscapes of distant coasts, still life arrangements of citrus fruit and imported porcelain, portraits of solemn ancestors dressed in black silk and starched lace collars. The furniture is sturdy and symmetrical. Chairs with carved backs, a heavy oak table, Delftware plates arranged with precision inside a glass cabinet. Luxury exists here, but it is controlled. In the kitchen, servants move quietly. Bread is sliced. A stew simmers gently. Imported spices, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, rest in small containers, their scent subtle but unmistakable. These spices traveled thousands of miles from Indonesia. You can almost trace their journey backward, from this polished cupboard to a dockside warehouse, to a ship's hold crossing the Indian Ocean, to plantations and ports shaped by VOC authority. Yet here, in this calm kitchen, they seem ordinary. The merchant himself rises early. He dresses in dark, finely woven wool. His collar is clean and stiff. His shoes are well-made but practical. Fashion in the Dutch Republic favors restraint over flamboyance. Bright colors are rare among serious men. Black suggests dignity, stability, discipline, He sits at a writing desk near a window, reviewing ledgers. Numbers march across the page. Investments, dividends, ship departures, insurance contracts, letters from Batavia reporting yields and losses. Commerce never fully sleeps. But here it feels distant, translated into columns of ink rather than crashing waves. His wife manages the household with equal care. She oversees servants, instructs children in reading and prayer, maintains accounts for domestic expenses. Linen is inspected, silver polished, floors swept daily. Cleanliness becomes almost a moral virtue. Windows are washed, stoops scrubbed, interiors kept orderly. In a society shaped by Calvinist values, visible tidiness reflects inward discipline. Upstairs, bedrooms are simple yet comfortable. Beds enclosed within wooden frames to conserve warmth. Feather mattresses soften the surface. Heavy curtains reduce drafts. A small brazier warms the room in winter. Children learn early the habits of moderation. They study scripture, practice writing, learn arithmetic necessary for trade. Toys are modest, wooden blocks, simple dolls. Education matters deeply in this world. Literacy rates in the Dutch Republic are among the highest in Europe at the time. Reading and record-keeping underpin commerce and faith alike. In a rear room overlooking the garden, perhaps there is a collection of curiosities, shells, maps, exotic textiles, a globe marked with trade routes. The world has come to this house in fragments. Yet beyond the back wall lies a quiet garden, symmetrical beds, clipped shrubs, gravel paths. Order imposed upon nature. This is the counterpoint to the ship at sea. There, chaos threatens constantly, weather, disease, mutiny. Here, symmetry reigns. Even meals reflect measured abundance. Bread, cheese, salted herring, stewed vegetables, perhaps a modest cut of meat. Imported wine occasionally. Beer more regularly. The family eats together at a steady hour. Conversation is calm. Discussions of trade, city politics, upcoming marriages. Outside, the canal traffic continues. Barges glide. Goods are unloaded. Bells ring faintly in the distance. But inside, time feels slower. Evening brings candlelight and reading. Perhaps a psalm softly sung. A guest received for polite conversation. Tea served in delicate porcelain cups. There is no royal spectacle here. No grand ballrooms or extravagant court rituals. The power of the Dutch Republic resides not in theatrical monarchy, but in rooms like this, quiet, disciplined, commercially minded. Yet this life is not entirely free from anxiety. Markets fluctuate. Ships may fail to return. Political tensions simmer between Republican regents and supporters of the House of Orange. Security rests on careful calculation. Still, compared to the sailor chewing salted meat under gray skies, or the laborer straining on the docks, this environment offers undeniable comfort. Dry floors, warm beds, abundant light. The ocean's vast unpredictability has been converted into measured domestic order. You might imagine standing at the upstairs window at night. The canal below reflects stars. The city rests. In distant oceans, a ship carries spices, textiles, porcelain, destined perhaps for this very house. The world is immense. And yet here, in these narrow rooms, it feels contained, balanced, disciplined, a quiet culmination of trade, governance, faith, and social structure. From the vastness of the sea to the symmetry of stone and timber. Now, as candles burn low and the canal darkens into still water, we allow ourselves one final reflection. Let us move gently into the conclusion. We began our journey on the deck of a 17th century Dutch merchant ship, beneath a gray sky, with salted meat and creaking timber. The ocean stretched endlessly, indifferent and immense. We followed the life of Jan Pieterszoon Cohen, whose ambitions helped shape a global trading empire. We stood at ports in Indonesia under the expanding influence of the Dutch East India Company. We traced shipwrecks resting quietly beneath cold waters. We explored Calvinist belief, joint stock capitalism, republican governance, and layered social order in the Dutch Republic. And finally, we stepped into a canal mansion, where global trade settled into stillness. The contrast is gentle but profound. The sailor endures monotony and risk. The merchant calculates profit by candlelight. The regent drafts policies in measured script. The servant polishes silver in a quiet routine. Each life is connected to the same vast system. The ocean, wide, unpredictable, made possible the symmetry of Amsterdam's canals. Spices crossing hemispheres perfumed modest kitchens. Ledger books transformed wind and waves into columns of numbers. And yet, beneath prosperity, there was always fragility. Ships could sink. Markets could falter. Empires could waver. The 17th century was not simply a golden age of trade. It was a careful balance between expansion and restraint, ambition and discipline. As you rest now, far removed from creaking decks and candlelit ledgers, perhaps you can feel that rhythm. The steady rock of a ship at sea. The steady scratch of pen on parchment. The steady reflection of canal water beneath a quiet sky. Vastness and order. Motion and stillness. The past was not louder than the present, only slower, shaped by wind instead of engines, by candle instead of electricity. And in that slower rhythm, there is something soothing. The ocean eventually calms. The candle eventually burns low. The house grows quiet. You may let your thoughts drift like a ship on gentle water, unhurried, steady, carried softly toward rest.